So, hello and welcome wherever you are. I'm Reinhard from UBI Lab Leeds, and I would like to welcome everybody to our online discussion, Basic Income for the Arts in Ireland. What have we learned after 26 months? With 4 Irish artists, Alisha Doody, Shane Finan, Tadhg Cuirrín, and Conway. I would like to remind everybody that we provide a respectful space where critical and civil questions are encouraged. However, we will not tolerate any disrespectful comments. We have a chat section for comments and questions, and I would like to ask you to put a queue for question in front of your questions so that they can be easily found in the chat. You can also find the timeline of our event and useful websites, which will be added in a few moments in the chat. I would like to inform you that our event will be recorded and published online at UBI Lab Arts YouTube channel for further use. In case you have any concerns about the recording or any other issue, please raise them now or send me an email, and you find my email address in the chat. The organizers of this event are UBI Lab Arts, UBI Lab Network, Basic Income Ireland, and UBI Lab Leeds. I will briefly present UBI Lab Network and UBI Lab Leeds and UBI Lab Arts and provide a brief introduction to our topic. UBI Lab Leeds is part of the international UBI Lab Network, which is made up of more than 40 different labs in different countries and also individual members. I would like to thank UBI Lab Network for the technical and organizational support of our event. Our common goal is the advocacy for and achievement of a basic income for everybody. Therefore, we call it Universal Basic Income. UBI Lab Arts is a group of artists and art workers that are interested in broadening and deepening the conversation about basic income through creative practice, as well as making the creative case for universal basic income. They do this chiefly through creative practice, sharing sessions, and co-facilitating the conversations about the basic income for the arts in Ireland pilot. Unfortunately, neither Toby or Andy are able to make the event this evening, but if you want to find out more or get in touch, then have a look at their YouTube channel. Our reasons to advocate for a universal basic income: we experience an apocalypse of social and nature crisis on our planet Earth at the moment. Apocalypse means revelation in the Greek language. Our revelation is about an economic and political system which is failing most people, and above all, young and future generations and the self-employed, including artists. What has this revelation to do with basic income? Social system failure requires system change. The introduction of a basic income should be part of such a system change. Basic income can help to address the social and ecological crisis in our world. Money means access to resources and power in our society. Universal basic income would mean money for everybody and an empowerment of people. We think that the basic income for the arts pilot scheme in Ireland is an important step in the right political direction. Therefore, UBI Lab Arts, Basic Income Ireland, UBI Lab Network, and UBI Lab Leeds are very happy to host this fifth event, Basic Income for the Arts in Ireland, What Have We Learned After 26 Months. I will briefly introduce the concept of basic income, some ongoing pilot schemes, followed by John from Basic Income Ireland talking about the specific Irish context. This may be a repetition for some who have already joined our previous events. What is the concept of basic income as defined by the Basic Income Earth Network, also called BN? First, it's periodic. That means basic income is paid at regular intervals, for example, every month, not a one-off grant. It's a cash payment. Basic income is paid in an appropriate medium of exchange, allowing those who receive it to decide what they spend it on. It is not therefore paid either in kind, such as food or services, or in vouchers dedicated to a specific use. Sorry, I just let some people in. Sorry, I lost my text. Third, it's an individual payment. Basic income is paid on an individual basis and not, for instance, to households, which makes a big difference to our conventional social security systems. It's universal, it's paid to all without means test, and it's unconditional. Basic income is paid without a requirement to work or to demonstrate willingness to work. Other important factors in the basic income discussion. One is a common argument against UBI, universal basic income, is a question of funding. Often it's said by politicians, but also members of the public, it's a good idea, but it's just too expensive. Therefore, it's important to understand that UBI is just a redistribution of money. It will be taken from people and given back to people. It is not spent on any material resources, such as in education or health services. So it's just a redistribution. And funding of UBI can be done in different ways. My personal favorite option are fees on the so-called free use of our global commons, such as air, land, water, minerals, sun, wind, and also taxes on wealth and closure of tax havens, closure of tax loopholes, and tax exemptions. So there is plenty of money to redistribute if you have the political will and the public support to redistribute it. And the implementation can be done through the state, but also through municipalities or an independent basic income trust. What are the strengths now and limitations of basic income pilots? First, the strengths. Pilots generate publicity, like the Basic Income for the Arts in Ireland pilot, and awareness among people about basic income. The Basic Income pilot for artists in Ireland raises awareness about basic income around the world and also among artists. Artists can play a very important role in societies to spread the concept of basic income and mobilize people in favor of a basic income. However, there are also limitations of pilots. Many pilots have a small number of participants and can only generate some limited evidence. This is due to the very small finance available for basic income studies. However, even big trials, such as the one in Finland with 2,000 participants in 2017-18, are critiqued by opponents of basic income that the positive evidence is insufficient or not strong enough to be convincing. First, this is due to the fact that all basic income trials have certain obvious limitations, and some aspects, such as universality, permanence, and financing of basic income, cannot really be tested in a pilot. Second, the same results of a pilot are often interpreted in different ways and are unlikely to convince political opponents of universal basic income. What are now some of the other interesting pilots around the world taking place at the moment? There's one in Brazil. It should also be more called a program than a pilot, because 40% of the poorest people in the coastal city of Marica are receiving a basic income, and this municipal program is ongoing and serving as a model for neighboring municipalities in Brazil. In Kenya, several villages receive a basic income by Give Directly, a civil society organization, and the pilot is ongoing. In the United States, several pilots in different cities are ongoing and have already demonstrated some very positive results. In Germany, 144 participants have just completed receiving a basic income for 3 years, and the analysis of the findings is happening at the moment. In Barcelona, Catalonia, an interesting pilot has been proposed, but initially the funding was blocked because of opposition from certain political parties. Now the political parties involved in the government of Catalonia seem to have found an agreement, and hopefully the pilot will start soon. The Irish pilot with artists is very important to mobilize people in favor of universal basic income as a basis for a new social contract and a foundation for a good life for everybody in society. The pilot may produce some strong, convincing evidence in favor of basic income. The initial findings are very promising. I will now pass on to John from Basic Income Ireland, who will speak about the specific Irish context, including the recent national election and the already available evidence about the pilot. Thank you for listening, and over to John, please.
Thanks, Reinhard. So I'm going to give a very brief summary of the pilot project and the current situation for any of you who don't know, which I imagine is not too many. The basic income for the arts pilot program was started by the Minister for Arts, Catherine Martin, following the recommendation of a task force on art and culture. Martin is in the Green Party, which has a long history of supporting basic income. And the Greens have been part of a coalition government with two large conservative parties, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, since 2020. Now, the pilot began in October 2022, and the recipients will receive their final payments next August. So it's a 3-year pilot. The stated purpose of the pilot is to assess the impact of a basic income style payment on the arts sector. There are 2,000 recipients who were randomly selected from over 8,000 eligible applicants, of whom a few have dropped out. They get €325 a week, which is treated as taxable income. There's a control group of about 1,000 other arts workers, and all of the participants, the recipients on the control group, report on various aspects of their work and lives, and this data is analyzed by the staff in the department. Now, the department has so far issued 2 reports on the impact of the pilot, both of which are publicly available on their website, and I'll put that website address in the chat right now. The most recent report was issued last May and was based on data from the first year of the project. And besides showing that on most measures, the recipients were doing better than the control group, it also showed that arts workers from both groups are worse off in general than the average person in Ireland. So, for example, recipients spend more time and money on their artistic practice and produce more work and have more leisure time than the control group. The recipients are more satisfied with their lives and are less likely to be depressed or anxious than the control group, but they are less satisfied and more depressed than the average person in Ireland. Perhaps it's an arts thing, I don't know. They also make ends meet more easily than the control group, and they're more likely to afford basic items. But again, both groups are worse off in this respect than the average person in Ireland. That's just a snapshot of some of the findings. Now, I've been told that there won't be another report until the second quarter of next year. Now, for the most recent news, Ireland held a general election last Friday, and the results raise big questions about the future of the scheme, because Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael won a greater share of seats in the Irish Parliament, the Dáil, while the Greens party lost all but one of its seats. Negotiations are currently beginning on forming a new coalition government, which everyone currently expects to include Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, but not the Green Party. Now, before the election, all of the main parties said they were in favor of some form of extension of the basic income for the arts scheme, but their manifestos were very short on detail. And without the Greens in government, it's not at all clear how much of a priority this will be. Presumably, a lot will depend on who becomes Minister for the Arts and whether they will prioritize a new phase, assuming that it even makes it into the program for government. Now, there's no reason to think that the current pilot will be curtailed, as happened in Canada. The last budget included funds for the coming year, but we don't know what will happen after that. Now, we don't expect a new government to be formed until January. In the meantime, Catherine Martin will remain the minister in a caretaking capacity, which will allow for the continuing management of the current pilot, but won't allow for any major decisions about its future. So I hope that gives you some brief account of where we are at the moment. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Will I go ahead, Reinhard?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Anne. from Basic Income Ireland, and I'm just going to facilitate the next part. Well, basically the artists will self-facilitate really, but I'll make sure we stick to time, and they're going to address some questions about their experience and converse with each other and so on. So we have Alisha, Tadhg, Shane and Lauren. So Alisha, Tadhg and Shane have been participating since the start of these events, and Lauren is joining us for the first time tonight. Shane, so Alisha, Tadhg and Lauren are recipients, and Shane participates in the control group, but they can each say a little bit about themselves when they speak first. So welcome to you all once more. And so our first question is a very general one. How are you feeling now? We're 26 months into the pilot, 8 months to go. What's your experience as a recipient or as part of the control group? And what has changed, if anything, in the last 6 months for you since we all met here online before? So whoever would like to start is free to do that. Say a little bit about yourself when you speak first, and then you can all chip in on that question. You have to unmute yourselves first.
I don't know if anyone was champing at the bit there to go first, so I said I'd go first. Hello everyone, my name is Tadhg Cuirrín. I'm a visual artist based in Galway, and as Anne said, I have been a recipient of the basic income for the 26 months, you say, huh? Does time fly? And yeah, how have the last 6 months been? This last 6 months have been fine. I guess. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's 26 months. It's become part of the furniture. It's just become yeah, kind of a fact of life at the moment. And yeah, but by that same token, I guess I have been thinking about the end of it a bit more in recent times, not with any kind of sense of impending doom or anything. And I think we'll probably get onto that a bit more later in the chat, based on the questions that are there. So yeah, I guess the last 6 months have been kind of coincided with a lot of summertime. Summertime, I don't tend to do that much work anyways. Summer is a kind of a busier time with other aspects of life. I like the winter time because people don't expect you to do anything. They leave you alone to potter about in your room. So yeah, so I mean, I don't know, does anyone else want to add to that? Maybe Lauren would like to introduce herself as the newbie.
Okay, sorry, no feedback from the other computer. No.
You're okay.
Okay, great. Yeah, sorry, I'm Lauren. So I'm a visual artist based in Dublin. So I'm coming to you from the studios at the moment, and I don't know what sort of bio other people have been giving, but yeah, I work mainly in painting and drawing, and I would have been a recent graduate when I received the basic income. So I suppose I have like quite a, I don't know, I guess a specific experience with it where I didn't have like a particularly long time trying to balance, paid work and, artwork, before this kind of, winning the lottery, as I kind of would refer to it, sort of like landed in my lap. But like in terms of the last 6 months, it's been very busy for me. I was able to undertake a residency in London that I would have never been able to have done without the support of the basic income, because it meant like I could cover my rent at home, and I could sort of like bolster any additional sort of like money that was needed outside of the Arts Council funding. Oh, is everything okay? Yeah. outside of the Arts Council funding to yeah, kind of make it all happen. So yeah, I mean, it's funny with like opportunities in the arts because you know you kind of sink a huge amount of work into a certain time period, and you know things only kind of come good, you know, weeks or months or years later sometimes. So I kind of just, you know, it was an amazing experience, but I think, you know, probably like a lot of us, we were kind of just working and trying to enjoy the work and not worry too much about where these sort of outcomes and opportunities, how they kind of change and morph over time. But I guess I'm sort of thinking about that now because the basic income is sort of coming to an end. It's like, oh, I've put all this work into various exhibitions and residencies, and you know, it's been a great experience. But I guess I'm wondering now that it'll be coming to an end, will that sort of momentum and sort of like positive sort of reinforcement into my practice stop or be disrupted in some kind of way? So that's on my mind, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. Shane or Alisha, would either of you like to move?
I'll speak. I don't know, did Alisha disappear there? But yeah, hi, I'm Shane. I have spoken at the last couple of events at this. As Anne said, I'm not in receipt of the basic income, so I have a slightly different perspective. I am in the control group, so every 6 months I fill out surveys that are sent out by the body that set up the basic income. To kind of give that comparison. So what John was talking about just at the beginning there, those surveys that kind of like show the comparison between having or not having the basic income. I have an individual practice as an artist, and I also work collaboratively with a couple of different collectives, and I co-run an artist-led studio in North Leitrim. All of that is self-employed, and is that kind of thing of those kind of precarious incomes that Lauren just referred to there. So to give a wee bit of kind of like context on that, I guess like you're kind of always chasing income working as an artist. I think some of us know that, and oftentimes people don't. And it's precarious and it's short term. At the minute, I was lucky enough to win a couple of jobs recently that keep me with some sort of income coming in until about the end of March next year, and then I'm kind of back on the hunt. And in the meantime, I obviously have to be applying for things that will come up beyond that. I mean, you don't apply for things at the end of March that you'll get in April. You apply for things in November that you'll get in April. So it's kind of like always trying to stay 3 steps ahead of a pretty precarious and difficult career. So answering the question though that Anne has posed there, obviously it's a bit different for me because I don't have a basic income, but I have to say I'm probably feeling something that maybe other people are also feeling, is like a little bit of apprehension on behalf of the people who are receiving it, because I don't know what it'll feel like for people to fall off that. And it's 2,000 people all of a sudden not getting something that they've been getting for a while. It could be like quite difficult, I think, for, you know, for I don't actually, I mean, it's been something I've been thinking about all week actually, is like, you know, what happens if there's a sudden fallout of like mental health because like a whole lot of people right coming into winter have just had this income pulled away from them, or what happens to the kind of like the artistic outputs or all those things. And I guess we're here to kind of talk a little bit about that. But definitely, yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, as not a recipient, I think I'm musing about the same things. And maybe Alisha can speak a little bit more to the actual feeling of it. But yeah, that's definitely something that's been in my mind, is just, yeah, what is this going to be, and how difficult is it going to be for so many people? Because it's not nice to lose that bit of security.
Thanks, Shane, and apologies, I did drop off there very briefly, Lauren, when you were speaking. So if I missed anything, hopefully you'll understand. So my name is Alisha. I'm a visual artist with a socially engaged practice. So I work a lot with communities, non-arts professional communities, and yeah, I definitely am there with you, Shane. I mean, I probably said it 6 months ago as well, that, you know, I was already beginning to think at the halfway point about the fact that this thing was sort of going to come to a close. And I spoke at the last meeting also about, you know, having taken a step back from my teaching post to take on a residency and focus on my practice. And I made a conscious decision to go back into teaching again this September because of that awareness that this thing isn't going to continue. So right now my practice is quiet. I actually was unlucky and didn't receive funding that I had applied for, and where prior to receiving the basic income, that would have been devastating because it would have been my income. It was disheartening this time, but not worrisome in the sense of how I was going to continue to pay my bills, my rent, whatever. So I think that's an interesting one for me because that hadn't happened yet, where a larger tranche of funding, and it obviously is impacting my practice because of the project that formulated the application will now struggle to find its feet and things like that. The aspect of that application that would have been to pay myself isn't as important. So I can now kind of pick myself up a little bit quicker and strategize other ways to maybe fund the project without sort of that, as you say, the dip off in mental health, Shane, you know, because you really are at the mercy of funding applications when it comes to actually paying yourself when you're fully self-employed. And I mean, I'm cushioned too because I'm a teacher, so there's aspects of that you know come into play when you think about your funding applications. But I'm very, very aware that that's a compromise that I've made for my practice to have that cushion, and not everybody has it. So it will be interesting, I think, to see how things couple of months might look like, particularly with the change in government and the minister who championed the basic income scheme not having held her seat, and how that will play out in future government formations and hand down of responsibility and things like that. So that's me.
Thanks, everyone. And we will come to that issue of support towards the end in a later round of the questions. But the next question we agreed on was just asking you to comment on, has being a recipient or a member of control group, how has that affected your own creative practice? So apart from the sort of practical survival things, what about your creative practice? Did you maybe feel under pressure to perform or to work harder, or anything about the quality of your work that you would like to say in relation to the basic income? So whoever wants to go there, we don't have to go the same order again.
I'll quickly jump in only because I'm still unmuted, and I'm not muting myself intentionally because I think I'm maybe in this limbo land at the minute when I had to rejoin. But I very nearly reached burnout, truthfully. You know, even taking a sidestep on my teaching practice, but trying to maintain everything to perform, to be able to say, you know, I've done X, Y, and Z, and with the consciousness of the reporting and the hours that we were allocating for certain things and questions about exhibitions or residencies and all of that kind of stuff. So I've always said since the very, very beginning that I felt pressured by the pilot. And I think if it weren't a pilot, and maybe that'll come up again later, and it were something that was kind of an intentional government choice to just put into society, that pressure wouldn't be there. So,
and do you think that the pressure has affected the quality of your work, Alisha, or is it possible to say?
That's slightly more challenging for me because measuring quality is difficult, I think. Like if quality is output, then my quality is seriously diminished. But if the quality is research and time and that kind of thing, then probably it's improved. So yeah, it's a challenging one probably to get at. I don't know how anyone else feels about that. I'm really interested to hear Lauren's take on it, actually, because her position in the field as a kind of graduate coming into it is kind of new for the conversation, actually. If you don't mind me putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no problem. I was gonna go anyway. Yeah, I think that's very interesting. Like I'm kind of I feel, you know, it feels like a very spoiled position, to be totally honest with you, because you know I had quite a difficult time during COVID, where I was, you know, living on my own, paying rent for the first time while working full time and doing my degree, and God knows how many other things, you know. So I have a sense of how difficult it could be, you know, as an artist, you know, out in the world trying to, you know, double job things. But, you know, I got it, yeah, pretty much maybe a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years after college, if even. And then, but it coincided with a residency that I'd gotten, which was a big opportunity for me, in the RHA in Dublin. And with that, they provided like a lot of technical painting classes and drawing classes, which is what I was interested in anyway. So like it really was like unbelievable, you know. I started thinking like, oh, should I start believing in Jesus or something? This is like, you know, just and you know, amazing opportunity, you know, to have this basic incomes coinciding with a studio space and, you know, more formal tuition that I would have been interested in as well. So, but I guess on the flip side of that, you know, there would have been, it was in no negative way, like I would have felt, you know, I really want to make good on these opportunities, you know, that people have either, you know, given to me through the residencies, or, you know, that has been kind of, you know, randomly allocated like that. You know, I feel it would be, yeah, it wouldn't be great not to, you know, really show that these pilots can change lives, you know, in a way. So yeah, I worked very, very hard. I spent a lot of time being quite bad at painting, which I think was very important, you know, in order to improve my kind of skill set. I didn't begin painting in college because of the pandemic, because we were locked out of our studios, you know, for want of a better term. So I, you know, was really able to take that kind of medium, like take the time that that medium requires, which is, you know, a huge amount of hours, you know, trying to get used to the material and how it works. And, you know, oil painting is, you know, once you get the muscle memory of it, it's like writing, but like it can take you years, you know, to build up a sort of any kind of a pathway through that. So, you know, I was, you know, really fortunate to have the time to fail, you know, for maybe a year and a half. And then, you know, more recently, I've been making work that I feel very kind of happy to stand over and sort of present out into the world. And then as well, I think particularly being in drawing and painting, you know, I think having the time to really decide where I want my work to go and where I want it to be shown and how I want it to be contextualized has been a great benefit as well. Sorry, I've probably forgotten what the question is, but yeah, I think, yeah, because I know, especially with drawing and painting, there are many sort of open calls that are advertised with sort of like cash grab sort of advertisement and stuff. And, you know, I would never hold it against anybody who wants to get, you know, money, you know, for work that they do, you know, that there's nothing wrong with that. But, you know, there was some opportunities that I felt I would have only been availing of, you know, for, you know, a chance at a payment or whatever. And I wasn't necessarily interested in the curatorial vision or whatever you might want to call it. So that's been a very interesting one, being able to, yeah, understand my decision-making process a lot more, you know, with this sort of financial backing. So yeah, I'll cut it there anyway. Yeah.
Thanks, Lauren. Thank you. Tadhg or Shane, did either of you want to address that question about how has it affected your creative practice and any pressures you might feel?
I guess again, and not being a recipient, it's maybe just giving a perspective, but I suppose I'm kind of thinking it through as Lauren and Alisha are talking, and Tadhg and I have spoken about this before as well, a little bit like outside of here as well as in these meetings. I think something that Alisha kind of alluded to a little bit there as well, and Lauren too, maybe in kind of like the practice of material, is that some processes take time. And also there are kind of rhythms to arts practice, and they move through like long periods of research followed by long periods of making for a lot of people. I mean, I don't think that this is any of these things are universal. And I do think that, like, you know, something that Alisha was sort of saying there was that there was time available to be given over to this kind of like research period, which something that Lauren alluded to, oftentimes you wouldn't be able to if you were kind of like chasing a contract, and sometimes there really are like just those like I mean, actually there's a perfect example, a project that I'm working on at the minute. I don't want to say a huge amount about it because I don't want to sound it like it's a kind of a negative thing, but it certainly was something I only applied for because it had a reasonable payment attached to it. It wasn't something that was in my kind of like the area that I was totally interested in, but it was something that I knew that I would be able to do. And it takes time away from the rest of my practice in order to ensure that I have an income. And that's something you for sure, those are kind of like, I don't know. I mean, you could call it a sacrifice. I mean, sometimes those projects end up being very interesting within a practice as well. So I wouldn't say that it's a total negative either, but there's definitely decisions to get made, and being able to not make that decision or like be much more kind of selective has a couple of benefits. One, that you're kind of like focusing more on the type of work that you're looking to do. And the second is that probably somebody else would get that opportunity and be able to do that might actually be I feel now a little bit guilty, like, you know, did I take something away from somebody else as well? Like, you know, that's a thought.
Thank you, Shane. Tadhg, did you want to add anything?
I don't have a huge amount to add to that. You kind of covered a lot of stuff there. I mean, I think artists always feel somewhat under pressure to perform, or maybe in the sense that you're putting you put yourself out there in a real sense, and that brings its own pressure with it. That's aside from wanting to put a good foot forward or be a good representative for a scheme that you might believe in, and so on. But yeah, I think there is a lot to be said for not having that pressure to chase projects and opportunities and things. And there is a kind of a rhythm, I guess, sometimes with an artistic practice as well, that you might just have you might have a show to be working towards at the end of the year. It's rare that you have nothing to be working towards, and then you kind of go, oh, I don't have to make things for a thing. I can find a different way to work, I guess. So
Freedom.
Can I jump in just really quick?
Yeah.
Sorry. Can I? Yeah.
Come back in.
Just, yeah, I suppose to echo a little bit what Shane's saying, I do think that it's about compromises, and you know, you make a lot of compromises when you're financially dependent on your arts practice, you know. And I suppose my compromise is teaching, you know, that it's my time. I'm committing my time to teaching because I know that that's going to keep me secure financially, but it means also then that I have less time to commit to my arts practice, which is the thing that I would prefer to be doing. And I love what you're saying, Shane, and I don't want you to feel guilty, but it's almost like it's more even when we're all supported and we all have our needs met and we can focus on the things where our strengths lie, because everybody has the opportunities that they want to follow. And when you're compromising and you're chasing funding because you know you need to pay your rent in 6 months' time, it is a frustration to think that. But I mean, that's just, yeah, it's the situation, isn't it? And I think that you're not alone in that. I know that I would have done that before I started teaching as well. And yeah, it is a particular frustration. And I think it would be one of the benefits or one of the bonuses if we were to continue a basic income scheme, that artists were able to pursue those areas. Not to say that, you know, what you were saying about it, sometimes they become those really rich pieces, just like teaching can become really rich, and we soak up the world as artists, you know, sometimes really, really good stuff comes out of it, but it would be nice to just follow your nose into things rather than kind of looking at the peripheries and thinking about your bills, you know.
Yeah, it's actually, just to respond to that as well, it's also kind of interesting. I was just kind of reflecting on this particular one that I mentioned as well, and I remembered back to actually what it was that threw me off wasn't so much the opportunity itself, but it was the way it was all laid out. I could tell there was a certain kind of organizational structure that was going to be really annoying to deal with. A lot of reporting and a lot of kind of, it was just the organization itself. And I remember reading the brief and going, if I get this, it'll be worth it for the money, but not really for the time, because it'll be annoying. And it is. And I did get it, and it is. And I think maybe that's also kind of relevant, because it could, this kind of speaks to maybe something other that's kind of like also structural, is that an organization like that probably wouldn't get very many applications if people could make a choice about it. And then they would have to change the way that they put people under pressure to report. So it would actually maybe have a cycle back effect, if you know what I mean. It just occurred to me actually as you were speaking as well, maybe something worth kind of like thinking on. Although I'm kind of conscious that the time disappears so quickly in these meetings as well as we're chatting.
Yeah, and we should keep moving, but that's really interesting. So we were also going to do, the next question really addresses, how do you think the general public is receiving the idea of the basic income for artists and other artists who aren't getting it, or whatever, creative communities in general? How do you think it's being received from what you can perceive?
I mean, I suppose the fact that it's well, all the major political parties had it in their manifestos as in the recent election campaign is telling. As John said, whatever happens next, we shall see. But the fact that it's part of the conversation in a way that it wouldn't have been during the last election campaign, I guess it was probably only in the Green manifesto then, was it?
Yeah.
And then I don't know how much that is picked up on outside of interested communities, arts communities, we'll say. I don't know how much the general populace kind of picked up on that. But I think there's a bit more knowledge around it, a bit more interest in it, a bit more, you know, it's small maybe, but it's I think it is noticeable. I don't know if the others have anything more specific to say to that.
I wondered though a little when I saw it coming through in the manifestos whether or not that was just as much about like trying to get an artist vote easily without having to commit to anything too concrete, like, as well.
Oh, definitely.
I might jump in just on the initial question. Like, yeah, I think kind of echoing what Tadhg was saying, it seems to be, you know, from my interpretation of it, I could be wrong, like kind of, yeah, not really that strongly perceived by, yeah, the like non-invested, you know, parties. Like, even just anecdotally, like, you know, I have friends who are musicians and coders and like would be generally creative in a variety of fields, and like, you know, there was a big like, oh wow, you know, when you got it, but you know, I haven't had anyone ask me any major questions about it, or how I'm getting on, or what's it been like, or, you know, and these would be people who are, you know, in other creative fields who may or may not have been eligible tangentially, and then even, you know, within family units and just, you know, people you meet out and about, they kind of don't even really have a sense of what it is. They think it might be like the dole or something, and they go, oh great, good, great, you know. So I think, yeah, for many people there's not really a strong awareness about what it is, which maybe is maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's not. You know, if we're trying to obviously get this pushed forward, it's obviously not a good thing. I do know in the beginning, I felt, at least in Dublin, where there's, I guess, a higher concentration of artists who all meet each other at the same openings, I felt a bit cagey about it, because I know some people who were in dire financial straits who didn't get it. And I'm sure, many people would either be or know people in similar situations. So I found it quite, stressful managing such a sensitive topic. But I think, with time that has dissipated slightly, but I also wouldn't take it for granted that they're, I know I know a lot of people who still feel, the effect of not getting it in comparison to maybe 4 or 5 peers they know all around them who have it, that they see, pursuing their work, and they're like in quite a non-stressed sort of way or whatever. Yeah.
Alisha or Shane, any more? I mean, what Lauren has just said actually, well, I think it takes us to one of our further on questions. Like, has your experience with the pilot made you think about the idea of universal basic income? I know we've had some conversations about that. Like, what would it be like if everyone in society had a basic income? Have you had any developments in your thinking about that?
Well, I know it has come up in other conversations that we've had, and that, I mean, I wouldn't have been privy to anything to do with a universal basic income, or I wouldn't say I had any knowledge. It wasn't in my worldview at the time when there was mention of the pilot and all that kind of stuff. But the longer it goes on, the more I feel it's prudent to do it for everyone. I know I said very, very, like recent to the beginning of it, that I felt the fact that it was a pilot was a problem for me, because it was selective and all of those kind of things, and yeah, the further into it that we get, the more strongly I feel about that, because there's an awful lot of security that's afforded. I may not have even gone back teaching again this September if I'd have known that it was going to be continued for much longer. And the same as Shane, when we, like, somebody else that only wants to teach may be able to take the post that I have if I were to be comfortable enough to continue to focus on my arts practice, regardless of its quality, you know what I mean? So it feels like it offers a more kind of egalitarian society if people can choose to follow the things that they wish to follow. So the longer it continues, the more I think it needs to be a serious consideration for the future. And I hope we'll get an opportunity to talk about our other chats that we've been having outside of this. So, onwards.
Yeah. Thanks, Alisha. Anyone else want to comment of the artists on that?
Yeah, I think Alisha made a very interesting point there, just particularly around her paid work. Yeah, I've found it quite difficult to come to any conclusions other than, if I feel, that I've benefited from it, why would I deny that chance to anybody else? I guess is kind of as far as I've come with it, rather than the broader, I suppose, political and sociological sort of thinking around it. But yeah, I hadn't even thought of that before you mentioned, taking up a teaching job that somebody else, might have higher up on their list of like vocations or whatever. I think that's a very interesting point that you bring up there. Yeah.
I think I have some memory that you said something, Alisha, in a previous one of these meetings which was about like also kind of having the opportunity to say even job share, that you could take like some part-time hours and somebody else could take the rest of the hours, and then two people who would be on a universal income could also take some teaching hours and take the benefits of that for, and then you have like a less kind of unemployment or whatever as well, like there's kind of knock-on benefits again. And they're kind of complex structural benefits, because it's really hard to know without we've said this, I think now kind of almost exhaustively, but without an actual trial of a universal basic income, it's very hard to know what a universal basic income will do. There are so many unknowns, and these trials, they provide a kind of an idea. I mean, like I think I've said a little bit facetiously here before that like they provide evidence that if you give people more money, then they're not as like hungry or desperate for rent or whatever, which is you could evidence that without even doing a trial. And it's I think that like they talk about extending the basic income for artists, and there's been some really strange claims about how they're going to extend that, whether or not they're just going to give it to another lottery of 2,000 people and exclude the first 2,000 people, which also you start to go, where is this going to end, or what's the point in that? I think though, to go back to the question we've mentioned before, I don't want to repeat things, but also it's kind of useful, I think, for people who weren't in the previous meetings, that like I think none of us had a really solid idea of what universal basic income even looked like as an idea prior to the artist basic income being rolled out. And I think a lot more artists, and particularly within here, we have this conversation, but I know certainly I've had this conversation with other artists who aren't part of this group, who also seem to be kind of aware of UBI, and whether that's come to them through separate channels, it doesn't seem to matter. It's the way sometimes like something kind of reaches a certain critical mass of being talked about, then it kind of it just enters into a kind of a knowledge zone. People kind of like have more open conversations about it because they know they've heard something about it from before, and it feels like it's kind of at that point now. So you can kind of talk about UBI a little bit more. Where that goes to, I'm not sure. I mean, it's still the great big unknown, as we say, like, the not having a trial or whatever. But I think, yeah, definitely in 26 months from going from having zero knowledge about what UBI is at all, really, to having like had all these conversations and starting to understand it a lot more, it's been really eye-opening, and it's definitely made me think about not just precarious workers, but like just people in general, like what this could be of a benefit to a society.
But I just to follow up on that, I think that's really interesting, because if you look back at some of our conversations, and Lauren touched on it as well earlier, there was such a caginess in the early days of the pilot. And there was this kind of reluctance to talk about it, and whether that was from the guilt of being a participant and feeling as though the artist that you were surrounded by that didn't get it, there was an element of sort of, guilt. But as the research has progressed, and the sense of what you've actually gotten out of it has kind of been affirmed, there's now this kind of, I need to talk about this actually, because this has changed. This has actually changed things for me. And as you say, this kind of critical mass of discussion and an awareness about it, the fact that it was in all of the government manifestos this year, I do think that there is a little bit of kind of momentum there, maybe to sort of kind of continue those conversations and maybe do the education bit and kind of push things forward a little bit. But it's interesting 26 months later to actually be able to reflect on that and say, oh, we've moved on from not wanting to talk about it to feeling like we actually need to talk about this,
Thank you.
I think that comment though about the caginess kind of speaks to something we've touched on a few times before, about the non-universality of the payment and the issues that would raise. And as Shane points to, like what might happen in the future, and if they were to give it to another tranche of 2,000 artists, well, what's the point of that? And then conversely, would they give it to every single artist in the country? And besides the complications of figuring out who are every single artist in the country, that kind of creates this special category of people, and then you have this. We talked about resentment and creating a special group. What's so special about artists as opposed to carers, as opposed to farmers, as opposed to people with disabilities, etc., etc. So, and that's where it comes back around to the idea of a universal thing, and that's, as Shane says, you have to pilot a universal one. Do that for 3 years and see what happens.
I'm keeping an eye on time for us. We've just 5 minutes left for this part of the meeting, and it would be just useful to reflect on the ending coming, the final payment being made in August. And are there any processes? Has the department offered you any process for supporting you through the end of the payments to your post BIA lives? And if not, is that something you'd like?
Not that I'm aware of. I haven't heard of anything to that effect. It wasn't something that I was thinking about until John mentioned it at some point during the week. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I've been thinking of it almost like if you received a large bursary or a large piece of funding for something that it would, you would budgeted it until around this month or around this part of the year, and then you would need to be planning for after that, whether that be with some other kind of funding or some other kind of work. So that's how I've been thinking about it anyways.
Yeah, I would agree with Tadhg there. Like, I think Shane was making a point around we don't know what a universal basic income looks like, and maybe myself and Tadhg mightn't be alone in this. Like, I think I kind of mentally compartmentalized it into a very large extended bursary, rather than what an actual sense of like a widespread universal basic income would look like, because we don't have a sense of if the people working driving buses or working in universities or carers or disabled people, anybody, we have no sense of what it would look like for the whole community to be on the same baseline. We are kind of just like this bizarre chosen few, which I suppose is quite different to what universal income would look like. So yeah, I mean, I've been feeling the same as Tadhg. It's like, yeah, like my government funding has come to an end. How I've kind of compartmentalized it in my brain, rather than I'm losing 80% of my income or whatever. Yeah.
There was an email sent around that is the closest thing, I think, unless like those in receipt have gotten more than this, which is about minding creative minds. That kind of might sort of like half answer this, but it's not really. I just opened it up there just to have a quick look, but it's really there are a couple of webinars scheduled for January. They have some links to a 24/7 phone line, counseling service, a couple of counseling services, financial, legal, and career guidance assistance. It's a bit vague, I would say, kind of like as as specific things to kind of like carry on from the end of the project. And these have also been offered throughout the pilot, actually. Like, so it's just been kind of like a revision with some new webinars. So maybe that's also like a practical thing that answers what you're asking there on as well.
And just on the Minding Creative Minds is a service that was already available to all artists and is very much oversubscribed. And I think it was definitely a nod towards something, but if we're talking about anything specific that has been issued by the department, then I would say no, very much no.
I think that stuff with the Minding Creative Minds email was not specific to the end of the pilot or anything. I think it just, I was speaking to people from Minding Creative Minds in another capacity in the work I do with Praxis, and they just happened to have arranged those meetings with the Basic Income Ireland people or the Basic Income for Artists people. And yeah.
Okay, thanks. Is there anything quick that any of you would like to add that has occurred to you that you'd have liked to say, but you didn't get a chance to say in that session?
Yeah, just on the last note there as well, it's interesting that Lauren and Tadhg are talking about like almost compartmentalizing the funding as part of this idea of like the bursary and going back to a situation of precarity as if it's almost normal, like for these things to run out, because that's what we've been conditioned to accept in the field, and I just wanted to put a little pin on that and say, that maybe we need to change our frame of mind about that, actually, because from funding pot to funding pot, it's so it adds a lot of stress, anyway.
Yeah, that was running through my head. I didn't think it was my place to say it, but I'm really glad you did, Alisha. Anyone else want to add anything very briefly? We've 1 minute left in this section.
There's kind of an interesting point. Oh, geez, 1 minute. I don't know if you can do this 1 minute. But there's an interesting point to kind of like open up on that, like as well, is like the funding, the cycles of funding are also very problematic in arts anyway. And in Ireland, there's basically a year-on-year cycle of funding if you're an independent visual artist. In some countries, like in Norway, they have like 3-year and 10-year bursaries, so you can. I think there's something similar in France. In Iceland, it's a 3-year bursary as well. So you get like longer extended periods to work. In Ireland, it's 1 year, and then you're almost starting another application before you finish, running through the last one. So that's it's quite an intense way of continuously kind of like revising, rehashing work, and it doesn't allow for these kind of fluid motions. There's something we didn't mention at all, and maybe it's worth pointing. I don't even know if it has anything to do with the basic income, but is that like there were nearly double the amount of applications this year for bursaries and for agility awards, which are the two main independent individual artist awards that are coming from the Arts Council of Ireland. Nearly double the amount of applications with the same amount of funding. So a much lower percentage of people won those awards this year than did the previous year. And whether that has anything to do with like more people having been on basic income, having been able to apply for something like this, who knows? I mean, I actually I shouldn't. I suppose this is a very speculative thing to say because there's no evidence to say whether or not it has anything to do with that at all. But it certainly maybe even just talks to like kind of like competitive precariousness as well, which is like really problematic and kind of can get worse, I guess.
Competitive precariousness. What a great phrase. I have to write that one down. So that's the end of the formal questions, and we have some time now that Reinhardt and I will kind of facilitate for questions from the audience, and I think there are already questions in the chat. Would you like to read one or two of them, Reinhardt, or shall I?
Yeah, I can read one or two. One is a very challenging question from an artist in Germany. How is it possible to grow with less money? So are there any ideas, any suggestions? And the other one, the question is, did you feel any pressure to give back to the art community and society in general because of the basic income? So these are the two questions I found. There's another one, but I think maybe think about these two questions first.
Yeah.
Any volunteers?
Grow with less money and give back to the community.
Is there any chance that the person who asked to grow with less money could they maybe kind of expand on what that question means? Because it seems kind of an interesting question, but I'm not sure I totally understand it.
Yeah, that's someone called Ron Line or Ron Line.
Yeah, Ron Line, yes, yes.
Here.
I don't think he.
Oh wait, no, they're here.
He's here, but I think the person didn't want to ask. So
oh yeah, that's fair enough. Even if they want to try and elaborate, maybe in the chat would be okay as well.
Well, maybe we could just turn to the other one. So I'm wondering whether, if rather than a pressure to perform, you may have felt a desire to give back to the artists community and/or society more generally, and that's from, I think it's Michaela. Is that the right way to pronounce it, Michaela? Yeah.
I think that was a not
Go ahead,
pressure,
Tadhg.
but an impulse that I heard a couple of artists who were receiving basic income speak to as a thing that they wanted to do, and maybe it says something about the kind of the artist run and kind of community kind of focus nature of what a lot of artists do in Ireland. That there is a lot of artist run networks of one kind or another, and that most of the money that comes into it is public. So yeah, I did see a good bit of that. In my own case, I decided to begin working on a voluntary basis with the Artists Union of Ireland Praxis, and that's kind of actually one of the things I've been doing a lot over the last 6 months. and yeah, and in that capacity, actually, it's been quite interesting meeting different artists in different working in different media in different parts of the country, and finding out what their lives are like. And there's a lot of people want basic income. But it's, yeah, I guess it's so suitable for the artist's way of working. It's I can see, yeah, I can see the appeal.
Michaela, did you want to say anything on that yourself? You could maybe-
Yeah, I don't know, like it might be a bit too noisy. Okay, yeah, I mean, I've been in conversation with Ty on a number of occasions, and I have been talking with artists from Praxis as well, and yeah, I just thought it was something. Instead, I was one of the hope when talking about the basic income for artists was maybe to have a more collective approach to what it is to be an artist. And this was something with Praxis that we had already been, like the idea of a union for artists is not obvious. And it is really good to see that a younger generation has become more attracted to this form of organizing, and yeah, so this was kind of something that I've been interested in for a long time, and I'm just wondering how having a little bit less stress about one's own basic survival might open up a more collective, cooperative way of thinking, not necessarily in one's practice, but just as being part of a community. And I know that Ty, it has been a great pleasure to see Ty becoming involved with, being more involved in Praxis and becoming now the Connote officer. And so, yeah, no, I think it's very, and it's really interesting to hear what I'm very sorry to hear that some have been feeling such a pressure to perform. This was something with Praxis that we had tried to take away in the consultation process. We really wanted to make it about a better health and better conditions for the artists, not to make them work more. Yep.
Thank you. And actually, I mean, that's what you've just said is reflected in the question from Elena as well. Has receiving the BI opened up any collaborations, or has it made alliance building or networking?
Can I just jump in
course,
response
yeah.
to
Yeah.
Michaela as well? Because I think I made that comment as well about pressure, and it's something I talked about a lot. And I think the pressure came from it being a pilot, and I don't know that could have been avoided. It was sort of positioned almost like, if this works, we'll roll it out. And so the pressure came from almost feeling like you had to perform a certain way so that you answered the questions in a particular order that made it apparent that your practice was benefiting from it and that this was a good thing. And yeah, I genuinely don't think that could have been avoided. But what I will say in terms of the positive, and to that question around collaborations, networking, alliance, really what we've gained, and I think it's kind of shown in the research, is just a time, a voluntary time to commit to whatever it is that you feel that you need to commit your time to. And so the pressure maybe is separate to the you know what I mean? I would separate those two things and say, yes, we gained so much, but it was almost like the pilot meant that it had to be that way, that we felt we were never not going to feel that way because it wasn't universal and it wasn't being rolled out. And I think a trial is just going to do that. Sorry, Shane, do you want to say something?
No, I was just wondering, actually, you kind of opened up to something really interesting there. Is like, you say you're kind of referring back to the beginning, and you were saying, like, there was a pressure to kind of perform in order to make this pilot a success so that every artist could get it or everybody could get it. But now that we're kind of at this point where we kind of know that that's not really going to happen, has that also changed the behavior? Does it take some of the pressure off you? within that. Like, you know, it's kind of an interesting one, because I wonder, I'm thinking about Miguel's point, like, you know, I also wonder, I don't know Lauren or Alisha. I didn't know Alisha before we started doing these meetings, and Lauren, we've just met, although we didn't even get to say a proper hello there. But Tadhg and I would know each other for some time, and I think that we also would have done a lot of kind of like engaged work prior to you getting the basic income. So did it make you do more, I guess, maybe is also a kind of question, or make you easier about it, or make you more willing to take on more time consuming roles or something? That's like, you know, they're just two things that I'm kind of thinking of as you're answering as well.
Are we kind of self-selecting here in the fact that we volunteered to do this in the first place, and that the people who would be less inclined to have done that kind of work but also receive basic income are just doubling down? And just
I might be able to. Oh,
robots got her.
You're
Still
still
muted,
muted, Laura.
You're still
okay, the robot,
Oh.
yeah, it's returned. Anyway, I was just gonna say, you mentioned Tadhg on doubling down and stuff. I was, you know, I think, to be honest, I probably would have liked to have had more time to, like, it's been on my mind a lot that I haven't been, I suppose, engaging with more collaborative practices, and like even just the arts community around me as large as much as I would like to. But I mean, it's not really a complaint so much as you know, I'm lucky there's a lot of work I have to do, and it takes me a long time to do it, and it's quite challenging. So, you know, like the majority of my effort would go into that. But I have to say, you know, it's, you know, you could make the argument that, you know, if you become, you know, you're not reliant on other people as much, you know, like I'm not working in cafes with every second person who is an artist. I get to sit by myself in the studio and, you know, kind of have a sort of false sense of being self-sufficient, which isn't true, you know. So you could make the argument that it, you know, in my particular circumstances, just the work that I make and the way I approach it, you know, maybe you become more kind of insular as an artist. But that being said, you know, I'm quite aware of that, and like trying to sort of challenge that in my own kind of life, because I don't think it's a very good way to kind of be either as an artist or a human being, you know. And I do some work that is collaborative as well, but certainly I see the pull of, you know, oh, you know, I can spend all day in my studio by myself and do whatever I want, you know, and I don't have to engage with the wider issues, you know, that there's a big allure there, you know, in terms of the money, you know, and what that affords you, and how you can, yeah, choose to spend your time as you want, you know, like and I guess akin to that as well, you know, I know there's other people who've got it under music and they haven't written a song, and they've been working in an office and kind of using the money to just kind of hang out and sort of improve their quality of life generally, but they haven't used it to be an artist, you know, and like that is their right within the pilot to be able to do that. But, you know, I'm sure I know a lot of people who were quite disheartened with, you know, anecdotes like that. So yeah, I think people really take it in, you know, I'm sure it's been taken in 2,000 different directions, you know, with the money being sent 2,000 different ways. Yeah.
Reinhardt, do you want to address read out the other two questions, or perhaps you can see them in the chat? There's another one from Ronline, which I have to say is a little unclear to me. So, but maybe if everyone were to read it, you might be more clear than I am. During the time with basic income, there were one or two enlightenments for possibilities to grow similarly without the basic income, or for artists without a basic income. Does that spark a thinking in anybody?
Is it maybe speaking about have we gained any insights in our time receiving basic income that might apply in the time afterwards? Something like that, perhaps?
Is it like, oh,
I don't know.
I was going to say, is the question, what have we learned from the time that like doesn't require financial backing that like other people can then apply? Sorry, maybe I got distracted with the robot noises again. Maybe you've already come to that conclusion.
I think it's something like that. I mean, like the maybe the insights that I've gained are kind of stuff that you kind of knew anyways, that like it's good to like not be chasing after everything and to kind of like, you know, stare out the window all day contemplating your life and your art. And that's good, and we kind of know it's good. It's just whether we have the opportunity to do so, and that becomes that comes down to more material concerns a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think a lot of the stresses I would have felt having to do sort of 2 jobs has sort of just kind of morphed into the stresses of having to do 1 job for more time, you know. So I think it's like no matter where you go, like you're always going to be yourself. So if it's any consolation to the people who didn't get it, I wouldn't say that it cured my neuroses or failings or sort of like sort of bizarre thought processes. You know, it just gave me more time to make work, you know, which is incredible and has amazing benefits. But, you know, you're still yourself, you know, you're still battling with, you know, all those sort of, potholes that we all come across every day, you know. So I guess just to be really, I don't want to sound patronizing or fucking facetious or whatever, but like just to be kind of kind to yourself, because there's lots of people who are receiving that money who probably aren't making half the amount of work that you are. And if you're really engaged and like you like what you're doing, you know, obviously it's not, you know, we don't want to have all these setbacks, you know, in the path of making our work, but like just know that if you're trying your best, you're trying your best, you know. So yeah, I'll stop talking like the Rose of Tralee now for a second, and maybe we can get back to
we always
proper stuff.
in the basic income movement, we always say it's not a silver bullet, it's not a panacea. So yeah. Alisha or Shane, is there anything you want to add? There is a final question from Peter. So I'll just read it and then you can address whichever you.
I think Peter wants to ask it himself, so I try to
Would you like to say that yourself, Peter? You can unmute yourself.
Well, I suppose everybody has seen that. So I was just wondering if the type of projects you were undertaking during the time, was it different from what you would have done without the basic income? You know, let's say you have some provocative artwork in mind or so, and perhaps the expected reaction by the public, by your audience, may slow you down to promote it. Just wondering if you feel any difference in that respect.
Go on.
No, Tadhg, by all means, take the floor.
No, I was just going to say that while I haven't been pursuing anything provocative yet, I have tried to pursue works that I couldn't get funding for in the past. I'm kind of trying to think of it as support for all those things that I couldn't get finished in the last couple of years. And like maybe now it's a race against time to finish them all by August. But so yeah, so kind of more experimental things or things that I would be less comfortable working with, and maybe consequently was not able to get the support from a funder or from a gallery or from a patron, but maybe I can still make it and it might still be good.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think I'd echo that in terms of like experimentation. I definitely think that it's allowed me to bring in collaborators that maybe were from a wider field of other professions that I probably wouldn't have felt as comfortable to do because it was a little left field for maybe what I'm known for or what I was comfortable doing. It's also allowed me to pay collaborators without getting funding, you know, which I know it's not what it's designed for, but it's allowed me to, yeah, to broaden my network and experiment with other people on things where I just did not know where it was going to go. And I didn't know like that if it was going to be any good or, yeah, what it was going to look like or sound like. So yeah, that's been, I suppose, one of the big benefits. Not provocative and maybe the fear of rejection from the public comes into that, but I wouldn't say that I wouldn't usually consider that when I'm making work with communities because it comes from them anyway. So yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, the public's part of the work that I make comes in much later anyway, so it wouldn't come in the making stages for me usually.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it kind of made me take more risks in the content of my work. I think I was generally quite comfortable doing that anyways, to a certain extent. But I definitely, and I might be kind of sort of like prescribing something onto this here, but I think I had a really large problem with working large scale. I guess in many ways because of, you know, confidence and also the, you know, the financial of like working on a very expensive piece of material that would also be very, very costly to store in the event that you don't sell it. So I felt more comfortable, you know, taking risks in terms of how I make my work. And, you know, in my head, I kind of relate that to, you know, feeling comfortable to occupy a space of like, you know, fucking, you know, that traditional idea of like a 1980s New York male painter who like is like spitting and talking about football, you know, that maybe I don't see many role models for, you know, or at least I didn't when I was kind of younger, you know. There's obviously a lot of people who've come since who are making massive, incredible, ambitious work. But put it this way, you know, the money made me more confident to be able to take risks with sort of who I was as an artist and sort of like kind of working to a higher ambition than maybe I would have felt comfortable doing in college or even as a recent graduate or something like that. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to hand back to Reinhard now. I'll let Shane is that okay with you? I know you didn't comment on that. Yeah, thanks. So that Reinhard can finish us up. So thanks for that great responses and for the questions from the audience as well. So back over to you, Reinhard.
Yeah, again, thank you to everybody for your interesting contributions, to the artists and also to the audience for your interesting questions and useful questions. There was one question at the end about the evaluation of the project. There is a specific organization involved in the evaluation and they have a sort of design, so they repeat the same type of questions each time. And I think there seems to be another qualitative aspect which but that is, I have no information about it. I don't know whether anybody of the artists has any information about this qualitative aspect, which was mentioned in the chat. Just as a final question. Any information to share? No? Okay, so there is a design and this is repeated every 6 months and that's what we know about the design of the research evaluation, the evaluation of this pilot. Now I would like to thank everybody, and I think it was a really interesting discussion that basic income offers an enormous opportunity to artists, but also enormous pressure as pilot to do well. And moreover, the end of the pilot also changes the mind and puts pressure, makes you aware that this is not a universal, continuous basic income, but it is a pilot, which in itself is part of the problem of all the pilots, that not everybody receives it, and also that, as you receive it, you may feel you have to do something particular, and also that you become aware that it's ending. But also, on the other hand, there were quite a lot of interesting contributions that, if without a basic income, you're much more obliged to make compromises as artists, but also in everyday life in order to make sure you have the financial means to lead your life. So you, as artists, as you mentioned, you need to look for opportunities which you may not necessarily want, but in order to make a living and can sort of finance your daily life. So these are, I think, are very interesting observations. Also, I think somebody said that organizations who offer sort of bursaries and projects may change their approach if people would be more able to choose what they want to do, and would not sort of demand such laborious, time-consuming tasks in order to get a certain bursary or project. I think, again, this applies also if a basic income would really come about, that people may change their attitude to work and for whom they want to work and what work they would like to do, because people would be much freer to decide how they want to lead their life and what type of the work they would like to do. I personally don't believe that people would stop working, because I think work is a human activity, and I think most people, if not all, like to do some type of work, but they may like to choose what type of work they would like to do in order to feel more satisfied and to contribute to society. So these are some of my sort of observations listening to this discussion. Otherwise, I would like to thank everybody for coming and attending our event, and say that we're planning to have another one on the 11th of June in 2025 to sort of discuss the experience after another 6 months. And you are all welcome, and please spread the message and let everybody know that we will have this event and try to inform about the further results from the basic income pilot in Ireland, but also promote the idea of a basic income in Ireland and Europe and worldwide. So thanks for coming. Have a good evening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I certainly did, and I learned again a lot. And I wish you a good evening, and I also wish you a good start into the new year. And if you are a Christian, you may also want to celebrate Christmas. Otherwise, you just celebrate the end of the year and hope that the next year will be a better one for all of us, and a good one. So thanks for coming, and take care, and stay healthy and well and safe. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Same to you. Bye-bye.